Welcome back to the Staying Muddy podcast. Thank you, Dean Case, for joining us this evening. Dean Case needs no introduction. He has been an engineer for Mazda, Ford, Nissan, everywhere you can think of. And he's actually now a consultant as for Motivo Engineering. I'm sure most of you know him through the SAE world and have crossed paths with him at some point. But thank you, Dean, for being here with us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
You've been around and had a lot of interesting speakers on SAE SoCal. You've done like tours for the students.
Yeah.
And you've read a lot of books. There's a lot of books that we have authors come and talk to us about. Yes, mostly automotive books, and they're all really interesting. So the first question is kind of fun. What have been your favorite speaker, your favorite tour, and the favorite book that you've read just in general?
We've had some amazing. I've used SAE as an excuse to cold call people I want to hear from. So, years ago, we had Dan Gurney as a speaker, and, unless, some of the younger viewers might not recognize that name, but Dan Gurney is an icon of American motorsports. He raced in Europe in the 60s, won Le Mans, his cars have won the Indy 500. He's just been there, done that. His shop's in Santa Ana, and he's actually been an SAE member for many, many years. So we just got Dan to come and tell stories about racing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and everything. It was an amazing presentation.
Any favorite story? Favorite stories that he told?
Oh, well, actually, there's so many great Dan Gurney stories. One of the funniest ones was related to Carroll Shelby. He didn't tell that at the SAE meeting, but when Carroll Shelby passed away, and Shelby did all the Ford GT40 stuff and everything else, and
Yeah,
Shelby's got an amazing history himself. But Dan at Carroll Shelby's memorial service, it says, when they made Carroll, they broke the mold, which is a good thing, because if they hadn't, he would have sued the hell out of the mold maker. But Dan just had some amazing stories that he told about the development of the cars. And one of our members had just basically went through and took a bunch of photos off the wall in Dan's shop, scanned them in, and then we put a photo up, and Dan would just tell a story like, hey, what was happening here? And he just talked about the development of wings back in the 60s and early 70s, and just the way innovation would take place. That you'd have a problem one Sunday and the car would be redesigned in many aspects by the next weekend. And now so many of the race series are spec cars, you couldn't make a change. That if your car is bad, you're kind of stuck with it in certain aspects for the whole season. But that's kind of the price of cost containment. But another great speaker we had was Malcolm Smith, legendary motorcycle racer, and he talked about the early days of racing in the Baja 1000. And he's one of the few guys who won the Baja 1000 both on motorcycles, then years later in four-wheelers. And he's still alive and well. He has a motorcycle shop out in Riverside. And he's got a little mini motorcycle museum there upstairs at his shop. So if you're ever in Riverside, go visit Malcolm Smith Motorsports. But he was a great speaker. Tours, one of my favorites is we got a personal tour of Parnelli Jones's private collection. And, that was a great one because it wasn't open to the public, but we knew Parnelli, and he valued SAE members. So he gave us a private tour of his collection. We did the same thing a few years back for the students at Vic Edelbrock's collection. And here again, private car collection, not open to the public, but we used SAE to kind of open the doors to get in there. So those were some pretty memorable ones. Books, I can't even begin to tell you, I've got so many that are favorites.
you got a lot of them behind you.
What's that?
You got a lot of them behind you.
Yeah, exactly. I got a lot, and that's not even all the books I've got. So I've got a bunch up above too. So, no, I mean, I'll send you a list if you want to post something on.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's a lot of great ones, and we've had some even this year, like Chris Willis, who was an engineer on the Nissan Electromotive GTP team, he did a book on that car, and he did a webinar for us a few months back.
Was
And
that the Shadow one?
No, the Shadow one. Yeah, Pete Lyons wrote the Shadow book. That's another
Lyons
one
wrote the
that's
Shadow.
excellent. Anything that Pete Lyons writes, Pete's done a bunch of books. He's probably got at least well over a dozen books out there. They're all great. So.
Okay, but the one that you mentioned, what was that one about?
It was the Nissan GTP race car, the IMSA GTP program from the late 80s, which basically this Nissan car crushed Porsche. You know, Porsche was the dominant car in the class in the mid 80s, and Nissan just developed this beast of a car that was, I think with qualifying boost, it was like 1,200 horsepower, just unbelievable.
Was it like more of like a history book or a design book?
It's the engineering that went into the car, because he was an engineer on the team. You know, the difference, and that's pretty cool on some of these books, to where it was someone who was actually a participant in that one. And actually, I think I can find that one. So this is his book, and you can watch the presentation on the SAE SoCal YouTube channel. But this book, I think, is like 5 pounds, but it's very technical. I mean, he's not putting the equations in there, but he talked about the engineering development process and what it took, because for several years the car was not competitive. It took them multiple iterations to develop it into a championship winning car.
Wow, that's, I mean, you have that's pretty awesome.
No, you know, there's so many of these people around here, and you know, I would encourage, you know, hopefully once we get back to where we can do on-site things, there's a lot of people that you could bring on campus to Cal State LA who can tell some pretty interesting firsthand stories. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Like even Malcolm Smith, like that's in Riverside. Like
Yeah.
I mean, even, I think it has to do along with us being a younger generation. We don't necessarily know. All we know is like what's going on YouTube and stuff like that. California is like super rich in motorsports history. Like, oh man.
Well, it's funny that you talk about some iconic names. You got to be kind of a motorcycle nerd to know who Malcolm Smith is. But he was in a movie. There was a documentary in the early 70s called On Any Sunday about motorcycle racing. And Steve McQueen was in it. You know, the legendary actor.
Yeah.
Steve McQueen was in it because he wanted to hang out with Malcolm Smith. Steve McQueen thought Malcolm Smith was the coolest guy around. So that's how cool Malcolm Smith was, or is still.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So just to kind of feed a little bit more into SAE, you've been a part of SAE for, I think, the longest. What are we talking about? Like the 80s? How have you seen competition change, both like maybe in like Formula and Baja, maybe like some big takeaways you've noticed throughout the years? It's like, wow, from back in the 80s, Baja has definitely not been the same as what we're looking at now in the late 2000s.
Well, the teams that do really well understand that it's not building a race car. It's not a race car competition. It's an engineering competition. And the smart team recruit the business majors to help out and get them involved. That the best teams are multidisciplinary. That if you just have a team of mechanical engineers, you're not going to be a great team. You need to have electrical engineers involved. You need to have some people from the business side, and maybe even, you know, if you have an art school or design, you know, group or something, get them involved. It's developing a well-rounded product. And the early days, you know, it was very haphazard what teams put into in terms of the cost report and the business report. Now they're much, much better. But, you know, it's interesting to look at it. I found it in my archive. Some of it predates my involvement, but I found this document that the first SAE Baja in California was 1976. There was 5 schools entered. And Cal State LA was one of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your history goes back to 76. My history goes back to 81.
Okay.
And, you know, in 86, we hosted SAE Baja up at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, because none of us wanted to go to El Paso, Texas, where it'd been the past couple of years. And so we thought, well, we should host it and it'll make it easier. It turned out running the event's more work than building the car. So we didn't do so well as a team that year from a competition standpoint. And then ultimately, you know, Formula is a spin-off of Baja. Baja was the original, and then Formula was a derivative of that.
Okay.
And, Baja, I think, has maintained, in my mind, a better purity to it and of developing a proper product, and really looking at everything related to manufacturing and finding additional markets. I mean, I've been really impressed over the last few years that, not everyone's trying to say, yeah, this is a race vehicle. They're looking at other applications for an off-road vehicle, whether it's safety related, fire department, forestry, mountain rescue, all kinds of different scenarios, which shows a lot of creativity. The Formula thing, there's a lot, in my mind, a little bit too much of people copying one another. And it's like people just look at who won last year. How do we make last year's winning car 3% better? And it's like you're kind of missing the point of the competition.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's good. I mean, the biggest changes is the fact that industry really, it came off in the 90s was the big shift for me. Because in the 80s, Formula SAE used to bounce between different schools. It was just held in parking lots. And then 1991, General Motors was the one to figure out, we don't have the time or budget to go visit 40 schools. Let's invite 40 schools to come to General Motors. And so that was really where it ramped up with industry involvement. And the reason, industry, we don't care who wins. We're not looking, we're not going to decide, I'm going to hire this student because they were on a winning team, not this student who was on a 27th place team. They're looking to meet smart people and see who they can engage with. And, Juan, or Crystal really impressed me. I want to get a resume. They don't walk away remembering where you finished. They just remember, that was a smart person.
Yeah.
And that's why the big shift in it. And I think that some teams have really understood that and embrace it. And other teams, you get a little bit too much of the motorsports mentality that all they're concerned with is we want to win.
Winning, right?
Yeah. Well, they want to win the endurance event and impress the design judge, and anything else they don't care about.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake.
I definitely have seen that. Even in our team, there's certain areas we neglect. Like, I don't think that we started thinking about it too much until more recently, that the cost report is like one of the places where it's kind of this black box still. I don't know if it's still true, but our team kind of hasn't figured out too much in terms of like what makes like a really, really great cost report.
Yeah, that's you're right. That's true. We've always sort of followed the standard what we've done the year prior and just always tried to be more specific when it comes to the cost report. But what it actually comes down to is still something that the teams are working on, for sure. And just to kind of go back a little bit, Dean, we spoke, before about how SoCal used to do a lot better as SAE teams, and now it's sort of shifted up to the Midwest, up to Michigan and stuff like that. Can you talk to us a little bit about that as well?
Well, I don't think that they did. There was fewer teams involved, and I think in Baja, I think the California teams are still pretty good because we've got a lot of off-road heritage and experience around. So overall, I think the teams do okay there. Formula has been, in my mind, it's altered because of a lot of the European teams who are spending just insane amounts of money. The schools, they've got budgets that blow anything away that we've seen, particularly at a state school level. And I think they're kind of, here again, missing the point. But when I talk to students, when I give my careers talk, one of the key questions I'll ask is if you have two choices, do you want to win the competition and have no job offer, or finish 41st and have 5 job offers? I want to work with the students who are looking to showcase their skills, because my measure of success, I'm really thrilled that the two of you have found cool jobs in Southern California and joined our board. That's great. And, whenever 5 years or 10 years from now, when you might be looking to change jobs, your SAE involvement will allow you probably the inside track of finding other opportunities. That's my measure of success, that you've succeeded in industry. Because I've seen it where teams put everything into winning the competition. And, frustration. I was there at Formula a few years back on behalf of Motivo, looking to hire some electrical engineers. So I went around to the teams, particularly those who were running in Formula, the electric class, and went to the faculty advisors I knew and said, okay, who's your rock star EE on the team? And the faculty advisor or the team leader said, oh yeah, pull this person over here. I go, great. Do you have a resume? Oh, no, I didn't bring one. Well, why are you here? It's like you miss the whole point of why you're there. That, if you did that, because, it's like I give them my card. It's like, okay, if you can follow up with me and get me a resume, we can probably get you an interview. And most of those students didn't do that. So that's a huge frustration that certain schools just kind of, in my mind, missed the point.
Yeah.
I hope whoever's listening, if they're listening, bring your resume to competition.
Yeah, or just have it. Actually, if you go to any SAE event, have a resume with you. Because
that's true.
Thing, when you're a student, you're at that one point in your career when you can be really blatant about your job search. And the more that people know what you're looking for, the more they will help you. I mean, if you're in a career, 5 or 10 years in, or even longer, you decide you want to change jobs, you really probably don't want your boss to find out you're looking to change jobs. So you got to kind of be very sly in your search. As a student, there's no reason to be shy about it. Just tell everybody what you're looking for. And you'd be surprised at how many people might help you if they know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've been harping us for years, Dean, about the students not taking advantage of everything that SAE has to offer after, competition and stuff like that.
But even in school, there's scholarships, there's internships, there's all kinds of other things that, and I joke with the SAE headquarters staff. I love the staff back there, but I'm the biggest cheerleader, but I'm also a critic. And that we have done, as an organization, we've not done a great job of communicating those aspects of SAE to students. And so I visit a lot of schools I've run into students who think that the only thing SAE does is run student design competitions, which in the overall scheme of what SAE International does is a minor aspect.
Right.
So we're a victim of our success of having these great competitions, but we have not done a good job of conveying to the students the bigger message. And so that's why, happy to talk about things like this on a group like this. So, if we reach 1 or 2 students who goes to SAE.org and discovers a scholarship, that's huge.
Yeah.
Or a student who signs up and gets an online mentor. These are all opportunities that are available for, next to nothing. I mean, and students should also be members of potentially another group or two. All the women should be members of SWE. It's a great group. SHIP's a great group. We just did an event co-hosted with SWE, SHIP, and NSBE because, there's other groups. SAE, we are industry focused, but we don't cover every need of an engineer, if you will.
Thank you, Juan, for that one.
I'll never forget it. Imprinted in my brain.
What's that?
I'll also, because Juan was he was part of the student activities board that put that together. He and Reggie recently joined, so they were able to participate in that. And I ended up switching over to the communications team, so we'll whip that website into shape in no time. You won't stop getting emails from me about SAE event. All right, so let's go on to the next question. So we talked about kind of how competition has changed, but it's kind of funny because we've been told, or that you have stories about Cal State LA, about the teams back in the days.
Yeah, well, actually, one of my favorites is Dr. Bachman's a great faculty advisor. And you've had several really notable ones over the years. The one I have the fondest memories about, and I don't know if you know the name Jim Ataro.
I actually don't know who that is. I consider myself somebody who knows a good amount of the history because I had to put it on the team website and stuff. So I did a good amount of investigating, but we kind of lose touch. So that's one name that I actually haven't come across.
Well, remember the exact timing. I was in Michigan from 93 to 98. So I came back from Michigan when I worked for Ford. I joined Nissan, and I got re-involved with SAE SoCal. And one of the first people I met was Dr. Jim Ataro, who was the faculty advisor at Cal State LA at the time. And he was just you always wonders, like, how much coffee have you had this morning? Because he was always very amped up and everything, just very passionate about what he was doing and supporting the students. And there was some strong interest at the time in electric vehicles, and I was doing electric vehicles at Nissan. And it's interesting how things work out timing-wise. In 1998, Nissan was struggling. They were, jokingly referred to as beleaguered Nissan at the time. They were $20 billion in the red globally. And that was before Renault stepped in and, the merger took place and Nissan's fortunes took off. But we were operating on very, very lean budgets. And we had an event coming up. We were invited to participate in the Michelin Challenge Bibendum, which was a showcase the Michelin Tire Company was going to do out at Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, showcasing environmental vehicles. And we had some vehicles to take out there, but we didn't have enough staff to support it. And so I called up Dr. Ataro and said, do you think your students would like to come out and work with us? And we brainstormed a plan to where I think Nissan donated $5,000 to Cal State LA. And then we had the students, and we gave all the, I think it was your boss, I don't remember if it was the Formula team. No, it was Super Mileage. It was Super Mileage.
Oh.
And we had everyone on the Cal State LA Super Mileage team. They brought their car out, but we had them all in Nissan shirts. We had them driving our Nissan electric vehicles and hybrids and everything in the competition. And we trusted them. It's kind of like, so we had college students driving it, and other teams had paid professionals. Honda had hired teams, who were really good at very efficient driving, because this was a competition. What kind of range could you get out of your electric car? How much miles per gallon could you get out of your hybrids? And we had a bunch of college students who had only driven the cars like 30 minutes before the competition started. And so we joked that if we won, that was great. If we lost, well, it's because we had a bunch of college students helping us out. The reality was we were able to give the students a really cool experience, and it led to someone you should invite to do a podcast, Steve Lamb. Steve Lamb, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what led to Steve Lamb joining Nissan. We met him there, and I don't know if I don't remember if we took his resume back or he just applied online after that. And he had a pretty cool Nissan career until 2006, when he and I both quit rather than moved to Nashville. And Steve set up his own business, so he's running his own automotive repair facility. But that's a really cool Cal State LA success story. But I like the fact that it was all tied in to SAE and Dr. Ataro and everything, to where we had a need and we were able to turn that need. We couldn't afford to pay some outside consultants $50,000. So we donated $5,000 to Cal State LA, which at the time, that was a huge donation for the Super Mileage team.
The Cal State LA teams will do anything for money.
Yeah, but more importantly, we got to showcase the students in front of industry and media and stuff. So that's one of my favorite Cal State LA stories. Just, we were able to do that. And then later on, we had a U.S. electric car EV at Nissan, just as kind of a benchmark, because in 1998 there weren't really any EVs out there to do comparisons with. It's like, how good is your car? We have nothing to compare it against. So we bought a U.S. electric car, which was kind of a piece of junk. But when we were done testing it, we donated it to Cal State LA for their lab, because we want any electric car. We don't care what it is. I think it got destroyed a few years ago. I asked Dr. Bachman, he said it's gone. But if you're doing a history of Cal State LA,
I don't know if it's
SAE, Dr. Ataro deserves a chapter in there.
All right, we'll definitely reach out to these people and see if they want to come and join us, because we can always use guests. That's a funny history. And our solar car team, I don't know how long it was around. I don't think it was very long, but they definitely did well in a lot of their competitions.
Yeah. Yeah, the Solar Eagle.
Yeah, so it's kind of a shame that they like their team dropped out. In EcoCar too, they didn't get their application approved to continue. So they had, I think it's only 3 years that they've been doing it, and they had to drop off of the competition because their application didn't get approved.
Well, I'm
We'll
a
see if they come back.
the I think Baja is really the best bang for the buck, in terms of
It's been around for a really long time. I think
right.
that's a really big advantage they have. But they did have times where there was very little recruitment to the point that it's like 5-man teams where like
Yeah.
that's who was keeping the team alive, and probably even less at other points. But yeah, so they had scares with like having the team die out as well. But more recently we've kind of had a bit of a revival in that sense, and I think the formula team's coming back up again too, so their retention is getting a little better too, but it's kind of hard.
No, it's very hard, and partly just the reason I'm so pro Baja is just the budgets are more manageable. Formula gets more expensive, and then Solar and some of the other ones, partly just based on where the competition is, the travel budget.
Yeah, and
That's
we pay for our students to travel. Like they don't pay for more than maybe like food.
okay.
Yeah, we do their transportation. We do, if the hotel has breakfast, we pay for the hotel and the breakfast. And
Well,
yeah, it's like if you got lunch money or dinner money, like that's pretty much all you need.
is that money coming from the school or is that
Yeah,
from the fund? Wow. Oh, that's great.
yeah,
Well, like the traveling stuff.
yeah. There's like a separate like school travel budget, but
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
kind
really
of.
know.
But that usually just covers like transportation stuff, I guess. But
Yeah,
it's a lot of it's fundraising stuff. Because I remember for New
yeah.
York, we definitely, especially since we did do two comps,
New
we
York was tough.
that was tough. But we made it, and we got was like 16 people across the country, and
Yeah,
that
yeah, that was tough.
was great.
First time that we did two competitions. That's why it was like we hadn't, like it was almost like a last minute decision that we made.
Yeah.
And like so we didn't have a budget planned out to cover both competitions. It was just like, well, like let's just do it and see what happens. And yeah, we paid for registration for that competition without knowing if we would be able to bring up the money to go. And it worked out. So it was
Or
cool.
even go.
We were hungry over there though.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, let's keep it moving. So, as far as, that kind of that struggle goes, what do you see as key factors for keeping your Formula and your Baja team really successful?
One of the key things, obviously, a great faculty advisor is key, because we've seen a number of schools. Right now, we're trying to talk to both UC Santa Barbara and LMU, both of which had great teams, but then somewhere along the way, all the seniors graduated and there was no handoff, and the faculty advisor kind of faded out. And so now we're trying to reestablish both of those. So faculty advisor is key, but the other thing is trying to not have a team that's all seniors. There's too many schools, I think, to where, it's a one-year class project, all seniors. And there's no reason one group of students at any school can't capture magic for 1 year. But if you don't do a good handoff, it all falls apart. And so the teams that really, I think, do the best consistently are teams that have an almost equal 25% first year, second year, third year, fourth year. And yes, I know that at any Cal State, everyone's on a 5, 6, or 7-year program. That hasn't changed, but having that span and finding ways to incorporate, finding things that first and second year students can do to where when they get to be a senior, they're really much stronger. And then they've already been to competition. If you can have a bunch of people going to competition who've never been there before, if the entire team is all rookies at the competition, it's hard to do well. And so I really encourage you to make sure that you let, some of the second and third year students take key roles based on their ability and, work to take leadership roles if possible,
Yeah, definitely. I think our the success of our team is greatly owed to the fact that we started like being not aggressive, but we definitely started recruiting more intentionally. And in more recent years, like our team captains have gotten younger and younger. Like Javi, where's Javi? And he's not even in his last, like he's not even graduating yet. And it's almost like the first year that we've had somebody who had enough experience and knowledge passed down to them that they could fill a captain role. And I mean, the proof is in the numbers, right? Like we went from 62nd to 20, was it 29th?
Yeah.
24th.
The other thing, in every school, I mean, how you organize the team is up to you. But I've seen also a lot of examples of where you split the role of team manager and chief engineer. And the chief engineer needs to be someone really technically sharp and can manage all the engineering subsystems below. The team manager doesn't even need to be an engineering major necessarily. It could be a business major. But it's someone to make sure that just everything's flowing, conflict resolution, fundraising, engaging with industry and alums, all of that. And that's a critical role. And if the chief engineer is also trying to do all those things, sometimes engineering failures occur because they're not managing that job. So that's something to consider, if you can split it up that way. And one of the funniest ones, an observation that I've just kind of come to in the last couple of years is, when I like to look at resumes, what are your non-engineering jobs even? And I know that, basically anyone who went to a Cal State is usually working part-time at least while they're going to school. And I see a lot of times the students don't list what they did that wasn't an engineering job. It's like, no, I want to know what it is. And the reason I want to know is because sometimes there's some skill sets you learn elsewhere that are surprisingly applicable. And one of them is restaurant management. And I've seen this a couple times now. It didn't click the first time, but after I ran to like 3 people in a row who had managed high-end restaurants, who were then the team manager on a Formula Baja team that are really, really good. Because managing a restaurant is very difficult. You've got customers who want their food perfect. You've got the wait staff who wants big tips. You've got the back of the house, the cooks and the cleanup crew who wants to be treated with some respect. You got the owner, you've got all these conflicting things to manage. And if you can manage that, it's pretty good training to manage a bunch of engineers on a program.
I had never considered that.
I never would have thought that until I ran to like 3 in a row over the course of 1 year. 3 of the best team managers I met all had that on their resumes. Wow.
You heard it here first. Go send your team manager to manage a restaurant for a year.
Yeah, exactly. Or find a restaurant manager who likes cars and recruit them onto your team.
There you go. I'd hire them.
We are having a Panda Express collab fundraiser all day Wednesday, December 30th with our sister team, Formula SAE. Available nationwide. Place your order for pickup or delivery, applying code 901442 in the coupon code box during online checkout at order.pandaexpress.com or app. Again, you can use the code 901442 on December 30th when purchasing Panda Express anywhere in the US. Thanks.
So you know a lot in terms of automotive history through SAE, through your experience on the teams, just like your passion for F1 racing and all that stuff. And so you've built up. I actually think of you a lot from like my personal experiences with you as kind of like a walking history book. If you'll take that compliment.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is like, how does somebody who's kind of, maybe has a more like limited world and like you've always been a student, you've always kind of like you have an interest in cars or you have an interest, but like you haven't really built up that knowledge. So like what's a good way to to build up that knowledge in terms of like whether it's technical or just historical? Like, how do you build that library for yourself?
A lot of it's just is reading and going. Actually, it's funny. A great source for inexpensive books is find your public library and check for the Friends of the Library shop. And they usually sell books there like $1 and $2 each. And so, I bought a lot of expensive car books, and I've also bought a lot of cheap car books. But I read a lot now. It's amazing how much you can find on YouTube and some pretty cool videos. But it's kind of like any source of news. You got to kind of fact check and verify what the source is, that it's accurate. But a lot of it, here again, if Cal State LA, because of your location, you can get some people who are firsthand experts. People who are involved in it. If you want to know about designing sports car suspensions and aerodynamics, you could get Chris Willis to come up and talk about his experience with Nissan. You could get Trevor Harris, who designed other race cars. There's a whole bunch of people that you can bring in to tap into. You're in a resource-rich area, but I just say start your library, check out some, cool books. I'll send you a list of some ones that, because I think it is important to know the history of the sport or the industry. And the reason when we did the student webinar a few weeks back, I wanted to have the Formula One alums talk about what it was really like to be a Formula One engineer. Because if your knowledge of racing is what you learned on your Baja car or your Formula car and watching Formula One TV, you're going to be disappointed. Because what I like about Baja is you can be creative, and there'll be failures, and failures are not really failures to a certain degree. You tried something. In industry, you tend to be run safe. Like, well, we can't risk having a failure out in the marketplace. Well, as a student, go for it. Try something really risky on the car. As long as it's not a safety issue. If you want to try something crazy, do it. And if it doesn't work, as long as you understood why it didn't work and you can explain that, that's great. It's better to have you do a failure on a student project than a failure on industry project where you'll get fired.
And then if it doesn't work, they'll always just add another rule to the rule book.
but ultimately, just going to races and stuff, any races, club races and stuff, and go out. If students want to get some experience, go to an SCCA or a NASA club race, and just go up and ask questions about the car, and you'll find a surprising number of club racers are engineers. And they might be an electrical engineer in a biomedical company or a civil engineer designing bridges, but they have fun on the weekend racing cars, and they would welcome an engineering student helping out on their crew. They won't pay you, but at least you gain some experience, and you can probably pick up a mentor that way or some experience. But I do, I've worked with so many teenage race drivers when I was with Mazda Motorsports, and I'd ask drivers some history questions, and they, oh yeah, I know the history. I know the old stuff, like Ayrton Senna. Well, Ayrton Senna to me is not the old stuff. That was kind of the middle stuff. The old stuff is Fangio and Jimmy Clark and names from the 50s and 60s. And you have to understand that a lot of this predates all of us. But now you can find some incredible stuff on YouTube. Some of it is not like a modern video. I found one, some documentaries done in the 60s on Can-Am and IndyCar racing. So you can find some really cool stuff out there to watch.
We'll get some YouTube channel recommendations from you too.
Yeah.
Later on. Go to the Reddit. We'll post them there.
Okay.
We have a Reddit channel for anybody who kind of wants to discuss the podcast. I'm hoping it picks up a little more. It's lots of crickets in there right now, but
yeah, no, I know how that goes. We're still not getting much of any discussion on SAE SoCal's YouTube channel or Facebook page yet, so it takes time.
One day.
So I think everyone including myself, wants to know from the man that needs no introduction. We want to know your first car. We want to know your favorite car, and we also want to know if you could own any car, what would it be?
First car was a 1967 Mini Cooper. An original Mini, a real Mini.
Like that. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. All my friends, I graduated in high school in 81. All my friends, I had like 3 friends who had 67 Camaros. A 67 Camaro was the hot ticket at my high school in 81. I wanted something different. And have you ever seen the original movie, The Italian Job?
I haven't, no.
There was a bad remake a few years back, but there was one in late 68 or 69 or something, and Michael Caine. It was a gold heist, and they made away with the gold in 3 Mini Coopers. And that was the movie that inspired me to want to own a Mini Cooper. It was such a cool car. So I bought one that was in kind of rough shape because it was what I could afford, and my dad and I restored it. So that was cool. I learned a lot on that. Favorite car that I've owned?
I guess you don't have to have owned it.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's just your favorite car in general.
Yeah.
Well, the car that I'll never be able to afford, but I think for me the ultimate exotic car was the original Lamborghini Miura. And that was just such a gorgeous car. And then, favorite, I'm biased on this one, but the Miata, because it was such an affordable sports car. I love the Miura, but for the most part, I don't care about exotics because I'm not interested in a car that's more expensive than most people's homes. That's just not attainable. Yeah. And, the stuff about the car that may or may not have gone 336 miles per hour, and they're calling it a production car. It's like, yeah, you built 1, maybe 2. That's not a production car. If you look at General Motors, what they've done with the new Corvette, that's unbelievable performance for under $80,000. That's incredible.
A lot of people hate on me because those are the cars that I want.
Which ones?
Juan has said something or two to me about wanting a Corvette.
Well, I don't actually want the Corvette, but I just respect
I
the
do.
Yeah. But the performance for dollar is incredible. And it's easier. It's a lot more challenging to design a great $25,000 sports car than a $250,000 sports car.
Yeah.
Because
you have no limit.
Yeah. And like, if you are looking at a car, we'll go back to the Miata as an example. If you discovered you had a noise or vibration issue, to solve it, you need to throw maybe cents or a few dollars to fix it. If you had the same problem on a McLaren or Ferrari or Lamborghini, you could spend $5,000 to fix the problem, and still make profit on the car. Is the lower the price point, the more interesting the challenge. At Ford Motor Company, when I was there, the smartest engineers were not working on the Mustang. They were working on the F-Series pickup truck because that's what made money. And, everyone said, oh, I'd love to work on the Mustang. Well, that wasn't the cash cow. The cash cow was the F-150 pickup truck. And so ultimately, the smartest engineers kind of get onto the projects that make money. And, those are the volume products. And so that's, for me, I think it's just fun to have cars that are accessible to anybody.
You've owned a few Miatas in your day?
Actually, no, because I got to drive them all the time for work. So
That's right.
Yeah, we had an '84 RX-7. That was my wife, so I had that. But that's the funny thing, that when you work for a car company, you get to check out cars. And going back a couple of years after I graduated from school, one of my best friends from Cal Poly went to work for Lockheed, and he was working on, I think it was the Stealth Fighter. And the engineering he was doing was so much more advanced than what I was doing. But I joked with him one day, I go, how often do they let you take a Stealth Fighter home for the weekend? I was like, you could work for 5 or 10 years on an airplane and never even sit in the plane, let alone fly it. You work for a car company, you may not get it may not be as high tech or as well paid as the aerospace people, but you get to take cars home on the weekends. There's something to be said for that. I had the first ever speeding ticket in the last generation RX-7. I had the first ever speeding ticket in the 4th generation MX-5 Miata too.
Oh my God.
I bet it was worth it though.
Yeah.
Probably not.
All right. So during your time as a student, because a lot of times we forget that you were actually in Formula at remind me what school it was again.
Cal Poly San Luis. I was on the Baja team. We didn't have Formula then. We couldn't get a Formula team going. This was the mid 80s.
And so I don't know how long you were on the team or how long you competed. But what was your favorite competition moment? And how many competitions did you do with the team?
My favorite, as a student, favorite competition moment was when we hosted the event on campus. Because that was more a test of my management skills and everything. And we successfully held the event on our campus. And the funny thing on that was, so I was leading the event management, not the car engineer. I worked on the car the previous couple of years. And we never got really any support from the school. And as I alluded to, it was more work to build the car or run the event than build the car. And if you host the event, everyone's assuming that you've rigged the event. You've already tested on the track, or you've designed, a turning radius on your car that'll just barely fit one of the turns, and you kind of rigged it. And it's like, well, we proved that was not true, because our team on the car was still welding on the car the first morning of the competition. Zero testing. And so we finished dead last in our own competition. Dead last.
God.
And afterwards, the dean of engineering came to us the next week and apologized to us, because he had no idea the level of support the other schools had. And the year after I graduated, the team got money from the school for the first time ever.
There we go.
And so, I mean, we joked, it took public embarrassment on campus to get that, but it was worth it for the school long term. But so that was, but the satisfaction, we got compliments from the other schools, that we ran a great event. So that was a high degree of satisfaction. My favorite moment as a judge on the competitions, and you'll like this one, Crystal, because you're on the business presentation team. There was a Formula SAE presentation at Fontana, I don't know how many years ago it was. It was so good. It was so good, and the team leader just crushed the Q&A. The president of Swift Engineering, which was still building race cars at the time, handed his business card to the team leader and said, "I will hire you tomorrow." He was that impressed with the presentation and the Q&A. He didn't even need to see a resume.
Wow.
You get hired?
No, she turned him down. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've already accepted a job at Toyota." But it didn't matter. It was the fact that, that was the magic that we're trying to create, to showcase, get talented people in front of people who can say yes to hiring. He didn't have to check with HR. He was the president of the company. If he wanted to hire you, he could hire you.
Wow.
And so that's my favorite moment at an event as a judge.
That's crazy. Did they I was gonna ask you, the question just left my mind. But do they have like a recording of that presentation?
No, back then this was somewhere between 2008 and 2011. So,
They didn't really videotape them, huh?
No smartphones or anything.
Yeah. And I know, like, usually the top teams, they don't release footage of the presentations either.
Yeah, they don't want everyone copying each other and having the same thing. But it was just good. But ultimately, that one, for me, and every judge is a little bit different on what they look for. I like to see that they can answer questions. And what I saw that one, there was another one a similar year. There was a school from Sweden, and I remember this very vividly, that every time there was a question that came up, the presenter would usually turn to someone and say, pull up, I think it's slide 42. And they had figured out like frequently asked questions, and they had us, not only did they have answers ready for most questions that would be asked, they had a slide prepared.
Wow.
So they had supplemental material. And it was like the judges were blown away that every question they asked, not only did they have an answer, they had supporting materials.
Wow.
So that was very cool. That
It
was
was
that
like
was
hidden
very,
slides, right?
what's that?
It's kind of like the hidden slides.
Yeah. But so it's like you've only got a 10-minute presentation, so you can't have more than, a dozen or so slides. They had like another 50 for questions that might pop up.
Wow.
It was impressive.
So, so to kind of backtrack a little bit, you gave us some lesser known facts about the Miata. Can you give us some about the Nissan Ultra, the EV?
Yeah, well, that was designed backing up in 1990. The California Air Resources Board passed a mandate that in 1998, this is before you were probably even born, 2% of all cars in California must be zero emission vehicles, electric. And so through the 90s, the car companies are scrambling. How are we going to meet this? What are we going to produce? And around 1995, CARB actually backed off and said, battery technology is junk. There's no electric cars that are going to be feasible at a price point that anyone will buy with a range that people will do. But we're going to hold you to building demonstration fleets. And so the 8 largest companies by sales volume in California had to produce demonstration fleets. So that was General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Toyota, Nissan, Honda, and Mazda, all had to produce demonstration fleets. And you got zero credit if it was lead acid batteries. You had to have an advanced battery. And back, in this time frame, 1997, 98, when you're doing the final development, nickel metal hydride was the best battery available that was affordable. Didn't have the highest energy density, but it had great energy density for the price point. And there's always that trade-off. So they got a multiplier based on that energy density. Nissan put lithium ion batteries in the Ultra, and which were much more expensive. But they were looking at this, if they put lithium ion batteries, they only had to build 300 cars. If they didn't done nickel metal hydride, they'd have to build 500 cars. And the total loss on the program would be greater. So they picked lithium ion so they'd lose less money on the overall program. So there was only 300 of those cars brought to the US. And just like the EV1s and all the other ones, all of them were basically crushed at the end of the program. It was kind of like beta software. They were not real true production vehicles.
Do you know, so I don't know if you just said that, but the performance of the lithium ion cars, how did they compare to like all the other companies? Did they have like some form of way that they measured?
Well, the range, the problem with all the batteries, but early lithium ion, there was a degradation.
Yeah.
And the Ultra, when the car was brand new, I think our official range was like 104 miles. But that was like driving like a steady 35 miles per hour with no stop and go, which is not realistic. The best drivers usually got about 85, maybe 90 miles range out of that. But after about 2 years, the range was down to about 45 or 50 miles.
Oh,
that's how much the battery degraded. And so that was a big problem back then. Lithium ion batteries have advanced tremendously in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
But early lithium had severe degradation problems. But, the performance was still good. I mean, it wasn't like these crazy, the Tesla with the ludicrous mode or anything. Back then it was all about maximizing range. And, I'd like to know what a Tesla range really is if you're driving it like a complete, maniac.
Oh my God.
Because, speed decreases range. I bought a used Nissan Leaf a couple of years ago because there's a lot of bargains out there in used electric vehicles because the resale value is poor.
Yeah. I mean, you having worked on EVs and with a mechanical engineering background, is there a way maybe you can tell people how to prepare if they want to work in electrical systems as an ME? Like if they want to work in EV, what would be something that would be great for them to know prior to moving into that industry?
Well, I would say that, my mindset, I still would have picked mechanical engineering. But if I were to meet a student, if I were talking to a high school student today who felt equally skilled in both mechanical and electrical, I would probably encourage them to go electrical. But the ones who are going to have the greatest opportunities are the ones who feel comfortable in both.
Yeah.
Motivo doesn't want to hire someone who will only do mechanical or only do electrical. The nature of the small team there, they want mechanicals who can also do some electrical. You may not be the expert at it, or maybe others right around you who can really take the lead and help on the most difficult aspects. But I think it's becoming more and more important for mechanicals to be at a higher literacy rate, if you will, on electrical. Candidly, I struggled with those. I joke that, someone asked me, how are you in electrical engineering? I go, great, took all those classes twice. Because I struggle with that stuff. I mean, mechanical, I could see it. I could walk into the shop, and I could do the experiments and I could figure it out. I struggled on the theory, so, mechanical vibrations, I think I got a C in the lecture and an A in the lab. It was even harder when I was looking at like circuits and things. So, I'm an example of someone who didn't fully embrace both, just because I had a hard time wrapping my head around it. But I think it is very important that mechanicals, if they really want to have the greatest opportunities doing projects, and maybe they should help out, have a senior EE on the formula team or whatever, mentor the junior level ME. That would be useful. But gain some experience however and wherever you can.
Any particular topics you think in electrical they probably should focus on?
Not really necessarily, just a general understanding. I mean, it kind of depends on what you want to go into, whether it's, do you think you're going to want to go into circuit design, software development, controls, I guess it kind of depends what your interest is. I mean, if you want to go into electric vehicles, like, well, you better understand power systems and motors. Are you just the mechanical engineer who figured out how to package the motor into the car, or are you the mechanical engineer who could also offer some insight into things about that electrical motor and the choice of it and the positioning of it and things like that. So the more you know about other subjects, and the same thing applies to, like, on the business side and things, that, cars are not bought purely based on, the engineering quality of the car. It's what are the features, someone in product planning figured out what is the range of features we're going to offer in this car. And, there's other people, the styling, it's like, years ago, I went to an aerodynamics conference where Dr. Paul McCready was speaking. And Dr. McCready was the founder of AeroVironment. AeroVironment has done amazing projects over the years. They kind of built a reputation on things like the first human-powered airplane, the human-powered airplane that flew over the English Channel. That was done by AeroVironment. And they did the original Sun Racer that GM did. That was built by AeroVironment. The original GM Impact was built by them. So a lot of PhD geniuses there. And Dr. McCready was one of them. I mean, brilliant man, far smarter than I ever will be. But when we were talking at lunch, he was talking about we should optimize a body shape and then just build it for 40 years. He had no comprehension of people buying car based on aesthetics. That people don't want to buy a car that looks like the same as it was 40 years ago, even if that was an optimized shape. It's kind of, and you looked how he dressed, it's like, I guess your wife dressed you this morning, because it doesn't, or it's just, he was such an analytical person and a genius, but he didn't understand human nature.
That's an interesting perspective.
And so, you look at that, when you're building, some things like, whether it's your Baja car, I mean, and I've seen that in your car and the other good teams where it's like, you've got to have a good looking car.
Yeah.
if they both work, which one are you going to buy? You're going to buy the better looking one, and or the one that's less expensive. You know, unless you're someone who was, you know, if someone threw on a name tag that said Ferrari on it, well, maybe I'm paying for a premium because of that name tag. But most people are going to say, no, I want the less expensive one.
Yeah, I always harped on these Baja kids to make sure that the car looks nice. There's always a stickler for that.
Yeah.
And I remember was it when Luis was captain,
The stripes.
yeah, the stripes. I was so anal about making sure the car just looked as, because it's essentially, and Bill, it was the other person that we interviewed. He always said your Baja car or whatever your SAE vehicle is your resume on wheels.
Yeah.
So if your car is looking spiffy, those judges are looking at you and they're like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna pay more attention to this guy.
Right. It's the rolling resume, we call it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So you've worked with EVs. You've been in the industry. What's the hardest thing you've had to deal with as an engineer? I mean, there are a ton of moving pieces when it comes to engineering, dealing with people in finance, dealing with upper management, things like that, and technicians. What's one of the hardest things you've had to deal with?
Sometimes it's been bad management places, you know, and just dealing with, you know, I talk about when I give my careers talk that sometimes a bad boss is a good thing. If you have a great boss, you're inspired to do your best work, you'll just work your butt off. You know, you'll do whatever it takes because you're inspired by their leadership. If you have a mediocre boss, you just kind of, okay, this is good enough, and it's 5:01, I'm out of here. If you have a compelling jerk of a boss, you're inspired to get a better job. And there's going to be times, though, where it's just, there's decisions made that you just have to, okay, I don't get it, or I understand, I think it's wrong, but yeah, you just have to grit your teeth and make that decision whether you're going to live with it or move on or fight, which sometimes is not, there are losing battles. So, I mean, it's frustrating. There's things that you get, it is challenging, like electric vehicles. You know, Ford, we worked on a program for a couple of years. I think we spent 2 years developing an electric delivery truck. And this is in the mid 90s. We were looking at what today might be like an Amazon delivery vehicle, but back then our target was a bread truck. So like, you know, Entenmann's or whoever, Dolly Madison, you know, a large truck that delivers every day, goes out from a bakery to a circuit of supermarkets. At the time, most of these were old school diesel trucks that were gross polluters. They would drive 5 miles, sit for 45 minutes while they serviced that store, do another cold start. So just horrible pollution vehicles. So we were going to do an electric version of this. And we had targeted fleet sales to do this. And the first time we met with California Air Resources Board, they thought it was a brilliant idea. And we worked on it for another year. And then when we finally got discussion of what credits would we get towards the 1998 mandate, they said, yeah, we really think you should build cars for consumers. We can't give you a multiplier on that. We're not going to be able to give you any additional credits. And we had the scientific data to show how much more that was going to clean the air. And they just rejected it. That was disheartening. We had spent 2 years working on this. And then they just pulled the plug on it because, you know, didn't work from a regulatory standpoint.
Yeah, that's crazy. I've actually been really excited about a lot of that movement towards like replacing all diesel truck, like I guess they're storage trucks, or I don't know what you would call them, but like industrial trucks going to the electric, and trucks in general. Like I'm waiting for Tesla to come up with an electric truck. I think that I would buy. I think that would be a lot of fun because it's like a huge vehicle. I mean, like we've gotten to the point, fortunately, that we've been able to do the consumer car, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, I think Tesla has that pretty down, but I'm curious to see like, what about like tow trucks or?
Well, within within probably 3 years, you're going to have a choice of probably at least 4 different electric pickup trucks.
Or even like a forklift. Like, can you imagine an electric forklift?
There-
That would be so much fun.
There's a bunch of those out there.
Or like all the industrial vehicles that they have out there. It's just like fun
Yeah.
to think about.
But yeah, electric forklifts are a thing, and there's it's kind of funny with forklifts. You're not worried about the weight penalty for batteries because you actually want the extra weight for ballast.
That's funny.
And particularly for forklifts that operate inside a building, you don't want them running off of propane or whatever they were operating off of.
Yeah.
So, yeah, electric for forklifts is perfect. Perfect.
Who do you think we're going to be seeing some more EV trucks? I mean, we got Rivian, we have Tesla. You mentioned
you got Ford and General Motors as well.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and I think Chrysler will do one. So I mean, I think you're going to see, and there's several others, small players. It'll be interesting to see on the startups like Rivian. Rivian seems to have a very solid business case behind them and backing, but there's a lot of other smaller ones that probably won't survive. I mean, there's quite a few EV startups here in Southern California, and you have to just assume that, they can't all make it,
Yeah, no, yeah, of course. It's so crazy how Tesla has made these EVs very mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the question is, will Tesla ever make money on a consistent basis not selling credits? They're not actually making money selling cars yet.
And it's interesting to think about. I mean, they've been able to drop the prices, so they have to have some kind of plan. I don't know.
We'll see.
All right, so we got a couple questions from people who are following us kind of like around social media. So we have Andrew Wong. He went to Cal State LA. He's an alum. Actually, he's in SoCal. He's on
Yeah, I
the
know.
meetings and tours team, right?
Right.
He's asking how many foot-pounds of torque can his factory Miata drivetrain handle before he has to reinforce it.
Good question. I would call the guys that, let's see, was it Monster? There's several companies that do that. Probably call Moss Motors up in Santa Barbara because they've probably blown up more parts because they do a lot of Miata aftermarket bits. I'm not sure.
But Andrew has a death wish with his Miata.
I remember I drove one back sometime in the early 90s, the first Monster Miata, which was a company out of San Diego that was putting 5-liter Ford V8s in the Miatas. And it fit. Didn't even have to modify the hood. It fit under the hood.
Oh my goodness. So whatever fits, basically.
Yeah.
Oh my God, these things look like Vipers. Oh my God. We do have another question in this one. This one's from Dr. Bachman. Why should students get involved with SAE? I mean, by now they've been listening to the podcast, they should probably get a good idea, but sort of
a lot of it's experience and it's connections. I mean, at school, working on the project, it's the experience of working on, a project like Formula or Baja or Supermind or whatever one they choose. Because in essence, by completing the project, you've demonstrated the industry you can do 3 critical things. You can deliver a project on time, on budget, as a team. And that's really, really important. So that's a key thing. But ultimately, I think what you found is, the connections you can make. That no one likes to do cold calling. You don't want to call up some company and ask. You can get a referral. That's so much easier. And once we get to know you, you learn, you meet people on a peer-to-peer basis. And what's nice about SAE, if you get involved in it, is you go to work. If you're a large company, Crystal, you're now at a large company. You're probably not going to spend that much time with vice president level people early in your career.
Probably not.
Probably not. You will eventually, but not in your first year or two. You get involved with SAE, on the board on a volunteer level, everyone's equal. And so, you're dealing with people like Mike Moyer and Mike Guidry, who are like the director of engineering at their operation. So it kind of cuts through a lot of that clutter. And so you get to make contacts that you would not necessarily make on your own. And that's one of the key values. And it opens doors that, I didn't have a contact at Edelbrock when we wanted to do that. So I found one and just said, hey, I want to bring in 100 students to your private museum that you don't open to the public. And they said, yeah, okay. But if I just called up and said, I want to bring 100 of my friends in, who are you? No, that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
What do you think the strengths and the weaknesses are of engineers today? I guess, I mean, like we're asking them to join SAE just because we've seen the benefit, but like what are the best engineer that you've ever met and the worst? We don't have to mention them by name if you don't want to, but like the worst engineer that you ever met, like what was characteristic of them?
I don't want to boil it down to individuals, but this is more like data points. Over the last few years, I've visited, I think I'm up to like 45 different universities I've visited and given presentations at. And so I have a lot of data points, 40 plus schools and several thousand students over the years. And I've been doing it long enough to where I think that, an engineer who graduates in 2020 or 2021 has better technical skills than ever before. You have more engineering knowledge, relatively speaking, when you graduate than I did when I graduated. And that's good. The understanding, communication, and bigger picture understanding is weak. And I see, a lot of students who don't seem to understand, just sometimes common courtesy, and things of when you meet somebody, how to engage with them, how to write a proper resume, how to do follow-up. That lack of follow-up from students, I think, is worse than ever. And maybe that's just me being a cynical old guy now, but I think that aspect is worse. That your analytical skills are top-notch, but, and here again, I also have dealt with a lot of these teenage race drivers. I would deal with an aspiring race driver who would be, no joke, 15 years old, who's been racing for a decade.
Wow.
They started in karts. And any joke you'd have about a soccer mom or little league dad is nothing compared to a go-kart parent. Parents who've been dumping, and this is no exaggeration, 50 grand a year in their kids' karting career. So by the time they get to the age 15, they're very, very fast. They've got, none of us is going to touch them if we go over to K1. They're going to just bury us. But they don't understand the business of the sport. And they just think that I've won some trophies, pay me. It's like, well, it doesn't work like that in this sport. And some of the engineers are the same way of like, I designed a Formula car. I should be, the person running, I should be designing the next Camry, not just working on a small component. A friend of mine told me a story at Ford that this one engineer, he was a superstar on the Formula team. They hired him and he quit after 18 months. His resignation note was he could not change Ford into the company they needed to be. So after 18 months, he thought he was already smarter than anybody else in management at the company. Kind of like, that's not going to work out well. That you've got tremendous knowledge, and skills, but you still don't have you don't have the depth of experience. And, it's not appropriate for someone like me to shoot down your ideas, if you come up with something crazy, but it may be, let's discuss that further and maybe bring up, hey, that was tried on this car and this car, and it didn't work. So go look at those and come back and say what you'll do differently. I think that there's also, my generation has to have a little more respect for the skills that your generation does bring to the table here. But there is a lack of understanding how to communicate between the two. And, right now, if I'm trying to sell you something, I have to figure out how to get to you. And, maybe that means I have to learn TikTok or Instagram, which I'm not on, because I need to market to you. If you want to market yourself to me to hire you, you have to figure out how to meet me on my terms. And I think a lot of students haven't figured that out. That, they have to, kind of, they're selling themselves and they want to get the cool job. They got to figure out how to reach the right people who can say yes. And I think students are a little bit weak on that. And that's one of the reasons of getting involved with a group like SAE. And like I said, some of the other ones too, I think women should absolutely be involved with SWE, great organization. And I hope that we continue to do more events with SWE and SHIP and NESB and some of the other ones like that.
All right, we got one more question for you. Actually, no, we have two more questions, but one of them is pretty quick. So I remember I don't remember where we were talking about this, but we were talking about the Grassroots Motorsports magazine.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about that.
There's another, this one, I love this competition. The only challenge for California schools is that the competition is in Florida. They run a competition called the $2,000 challenge, which, you know about Lemons Racing and some of that stuff. That's a little bit of a ripoff of, I shouldn't say ripoff, but inspired by, I think, the $2,000 challenge. So the $2,000 challenge is you have to build a car that will do three things. There'll be a drag race on an NHRA quarter mile, an autocross, and then you have to present your build book. So it's kind of like your design and your cost presentation all rolled into one. How did you build this car for under $2,000? And a lot of it is buying damaged parts at junkyards and remanufacturing because labor is free. And it's a pretty fascinating competition. And the teams range from very professional, I mean, actual professional teams do this just for fun, to high school teams, college teams, and then they'll just be like three friends who decided to kick in, or four friends kicked in $500 each. They bought a bunch of beer and they sat and built a car in the parking lot of the hotel the night before the competition. Literally, that's how some of them are. But I've worked with two teams, two college teams to showcase their talents, and one was just featured. Timing of this is yesterday's Wall Street Journal.
Oh, wow.
If you saw, I posted on my Facebook and LinkedIn page.
I think I saw it.
That was like W, I think.
So Michigan Tech, Abby Hempy, I met when I spoke. She was an undergraduate at University of Minnesota. I spoke there. And a year after I spoke there, she reached out to me. She said, hey, I'm in grad school. I've already done the Formula SAE thing. I'm getting ready to graduate, and I'm looking for some career advice. And talking with her, found out two things about her. One, she loves BMWs. And two, she's also an artist. And I said, well, have you ever heard of the BMW art cars? And she goes, no, what are those? I go, look it up and call me back. And so she did. She goes, those are amazing. She built a $2,000 BMW art car. So her artistic vision on the car. And I won't spoil her news, but one of the companies she ended up talking with during this whole development process has made her a verbal job offer. I'm hoping she's going to accept it. That she ended up getting a job based on doing this project. And as a nice little bonus, ended up featured in the Wall Street Journal.
That was a lot of fun. We got to get her on here too.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, she could. And it's one of those things that it could be that might be almost a better project for Cal State LA alums or something. The competition's in October, but that way you could just do something just for pure fun. The biggest challenge though is getting in the car then to Florida in October.
Come on, let's do it.
Awesome. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. This is so cool.
He's looking it up right now.
Yeah. Oh, and there's themes on. I mean, one of the teams a couple of years ago did the Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine. Everyone dressing up in costume.
That's fun. Yeah, I was looking at the cars, and I think a lot of them they're just so creative, right?
Yeah.
And like $2,000, it doesn't matter. Like I feel like people are almost throwing like the prestige and like the formality of the competition out the window, and they're getting real creative. And I like the restriction of the budget, because a lot of times in these competition teams it's just like once a team gets good, like they get sponsorships and then they're like leagues above everybody else and like nobody else can catch up, right? It gets a little bit stagnant. But I like the idea that it's restricted by budget and see what you can Frankenstein together.
But I mean, you'd be stunned at the level of workmanship on someone. I mean, there's people who have, thousands and thousands of hours of work into it. Some of the metalworking is like just, well, you've probably seen similar levels of craftsmanship at Singer. Literally at some of these where it's a work of art, the metalworking in there. And, it was the same chunk of aluminum or something, but if you know what you're doing, you can make art out of it,
Oh my God. I'm looking at their car now. It's got like rocks over it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And they're actually rocks from a particular area that have a fluorescent. You shine a black light, they glow.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
Awesome.
It would be cool to see those in person. Write that down for future SAE SoCal tour.
Yeah. Well, actually, if you want, we can hook you up. You can talk to one of the editors from Grassroots Motorsports magazine.
Yes. Send them our way. Send them all our way.
We'll get JG Pastor Jack. It'd be a hoot for you to talk to. He'd be a great podcast. He used to do his own podcast back there for the magazine. They stopped doing it. It just got too complicated, but he'd be a great guest on your show. We'll
do it. No questions asked. All right. So while Juan's daydreaming over there with those $2,000 cars, we'll wrap it up with the last question. So you've had a very interesting life in terms of, being a student in SAE, then being a judge, and being, an organizer for the team, working at all these really great car companies. So where do you see yourself in the future?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, I'm at a point in my life where I can be kind of choosy. I mean, I really love consulting at Motivo just because of the amazing projects they work on there. That's pretty cool. And sometime or other, once we get past COVID, we could do a Cal State LA tour of Motivo or something. But so that's good. And a lot of it now, I joke that, we all make choices of where you want to spend your money and what you do things. We don't have kids, so I don't have huge financial obligations, so I can kind of be choosy. So I joke that now when I pick clients, it's like, if I wouldn't spend my own money to have lunch with you, I don't want to work for you. So I can be choosy on stuff and do, pro bono volunteer work. So, I mean, I enjoy working with the student groups just because I get, I keep up on what's the latest. So I don't know. I'm not sure what's next. It's hard to say, but probably a little more of the same. My non-car stuff, my wife and I, we volunteer with a group called Food Forward. We do backyard harvesting for food banks. So, harvested 4,000 pounds of produce this year.
That's cool.
So, things that have nothing to do with engineering, but just,
just for funsies.
Yeah, just something that's useful. We do work with animal welfare groups. So, one of the coolest things I ever did with Mazda, we did a partnership with the SPCA for Monterey County. And we were promoting shelter animal adoptions on race cars. And we raised, over the course of 10 years, I think we raised over $150,000 for the shelter. And it got a lot of animals adopted. So that was pretty cool.
That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's I bet it was a lot of fun working with puppies and.
Yeah.
Puppies and cars, two of my favorite things.
Yeah.
So before we start closing off, I know, Dean, you got a lot of stuff that you want to plug, SAE board, things like that. So, I mean, the floor is yours.
Well, yes. I mean, I want pitch for anybody who's an SAE member. Make sure your first year professional membership is free. Don't blow it. Take that. Get involved. If you move out of the area, if you need an introduction, if you take a cool job in Chicago, I'll introduce you to the section officers in Chicago. Get involved there. that you're starting a long career path, stay involved in SAE. Particularly, I will give a plug for Motivo. They're looking right now. They're hiring. So particularly for electrical or software, if you know any software gurus. So particularly if there's anyone who's been out in the industry for a couple of years. So if any of your alums are watching this, go to motivo.com and look up the career listings, and you can reference that I directed you there. I'll send you some links and stuff that you can post. But like I said, thank you for asking about Grassroots Motorsports. It's my favorite magazine. They're really cool people there. And I could help you if you want to do a Cal State LA entry for that. Like I said, the biggest challenge will be just handling the travel budget. But, you get one person to either do a road trip, or you raise a couple, you raise some extra money, just put it on a truck and transport it that way and fly to Florida.
Oh, jeez. Oh, well, awesome. Thank you, Dean. We really appreciate you being here. Hopefully we have you again, because you definitely have a lot of stuff to talk about, and we'd love to dig in a little bit more. So this has been the Staying Muddy podcast. Thank you for listening. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Staying Muddy Podcast. I'm Mr. You can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok with the handle Cal State Baja SAE. You can also check out our website, Cal State Baja SAE, if you want to check out more stuff about our team, and we also have some merch on there as well. You can also join our Staying Muddy Podcast subreddit if you'd like. Thanks again for listening. See ya.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Staying Muddy podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Baja SAE and Cal State Los Angeles.